Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to What Would Kay Say? I am your host, Kay Edwards. How are God's blessed, highly favored, fearfully, and wonderfully made people doing today? I will tell you how we are doing. Of course, you know we are always rejoicing, right? We are always rejoicing in the Lord because that's what the Bible tells us to say. But today, we're going to think about 1 John 3 and 20. And I'm going to read this from the Amplified Version. Whenever our hearts, in tormenting self-accusation, make us feel guilty and condemns us, we are in God's hands, for He is above and greater than our conscience, and He knows, perceives, and understands everything. Nothing is hidden in Him. Now, think about that. Whenever our hearts, what this scripture is telling us is whenever our hearts when our hearts start to condemn and convict us for who we are, for what we might have done, for what we might have thought of, this scripture tells us we're in God's hands. So we don't have to worry about that because He's above whatever our conscience wants to condemn us for and whatever our heart wants to feel bad about or is trying to make us feel guilty or ashamed about. God understands because nothing is hidden from Him. So that's a reason to rejoice. So when you start to beat yourself up, don't even worry about it. God understands. So, welcome to another episode of What Would Kay Say, where we seek to hear the voice of the Lord. And if you have missed any of my other shows, you can find them on my show page, Radio Free Brooklyn, What Would Kay Say? You can follow me on all podcast platforms. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Kenya Z. Edwards. So now, also, let me remind you, if you're listening to this on a replay, I thank you for deciding to tune in to hear what the Lord had to say to you, and know that whenever you're tuning in, it's the right time for you to hear this word. So today, we're going to discuss a topic that I'm sure has affected each and every one of us at some point in our lives. And this month, the month of May, I've been getting a lot of calls and just people telling me about people in their family, people close to them passing away. I'll say just in this month alone of May, I have been told of 6 or more, actually more than 6 people that have passed away. And some of them I knew, and some of them I didn't know. They were like, of course, that person existed, but I didn't personally know them. But a lot of them I did know. So when all that information kept flowing to me, my first question was, okay, God, what am I supposed to do with this? Because not that you don't hear that people have passed away, but for me to hear so many in a short space of time, that to me made me want to question, okay, God, what is going on here? And then on top of just all the chaos and confusion and just people normally passing away that you hear on the news or whatever might have happened in your neighborhood or in your community, I wanted to talk about what people feel when they experience a death or a loss, right? And you know from personal experience, if you've ever been in that situation, which I'm sure a lot of us have, it could become overwhelming if you allow it. And this being Mental Health Awareness Month, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Today, I want to discuss the issue of dealing with loss. So today's topic is entitled Grief. And our scripture reading is going to come from Psalm 147:3 and also Luke 4:18. So we're going to begin with Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed. And blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keeps those things which are written in it, for the time is near. Revelation 1:3. So most of us, when we hear the word grief or grieving, we automatically associate it with the death of a living thing. And grief, I want to make note of, is different from bereavement. See, bereavement refers to the state of profound loss and sadness experienced after the death of a loved one. And although I've mentioned the circumstances that led me to do this topic, I chose to speak about grief today rather than bereavement, because grief covers the spectrum, a larger range of emotions that people experience. So rather than just talk about bereavement, which happens because of a death of a loved one, I wanted to go deeper and actually talk about what it is when we grieve. What is it that we feel when we grieve? What happens to our bodies physically when we are grieving? So now, of course, I'm going to go to Webster to get the exact definition of grief so that we have a better understanding of what we're actually talking about. So grief, according to Merriam-Webster, is a deep and poignant distress caused by an immediate loss. So now, when you understand that definition of grief, it helps us to understand that grief is multifaceted. There's several levels and layers of grief, like the onion, right? We always talk about the onion, peeling back the layers. That's what grief has. So you can grieve, given that definition, you can grieve anything. The loss of a loved one, a job, a change in your financial status, Like when the stock market is going up and down and you're looking at your retirement funds or your savings or your CDs or whatever stocks you might have invested in. Going through a divorce, a breakup, falling out with family members and other friends, a dream not fulfilled or a missed opportunity, getting older, a change in your body physically, your weight, just what you're able to, like for some athletes, not being, or people who have been athletic growing up, the things that you can no longer do now that you might have become older or might have gotten injured. In a nutshell, grief can be described by any event that changes the course of someone's life, because it affects everyone differently. So anything that has an effect on your life, a change in your life, there's a possibility that you might grieve it. And now, since we have that book definition of what grief is, let's look at the different parts of grief and understand how it affects us mentally, physically, and like I said, what it is that we experience when we're going through grief. Now, there are dimensions to grief, and it can come out in various forms. It can be, like I said, emotional, physical, social, and behavioral. And there's also stages of grief. Now, we've all often talked about, or I'm sure have had conversations with people about the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. You go through all those. What psychologists say is you go through all those different stages before your mind is completely satisfied or has come to an acceptance or an understanding of what has been happening. So today we're going to look at the dimensions as well as the stages of how people process grief. And my information is coming from the Cleveland Clinic and also from the American Psychology Association. So I want to start out talking about the dimensions. And as I said, grief can affect individuals emotionally, physically. So let's start with the emotions. It could cause one to feel angry, depressed, anxious. The physical signs of grief can be weight loss, fatigue, sleeping disorders, muscle and body aches. Grief can cause people to withdraw from society, mood swings, difficulty handling daily functions. Grief can cause difficulties in concentration and cause confusion. Brain fog and forgetfulness. So now, after hearing all those different dimensions, I know some of you are probably saying, well, wait a minute. I didn't suffer any loss. I didn't, thank God. No one in my family has passed away. None of my friends or acquaintances have passed away. But I suffer from brain fog. I suffer from forgetfulness. I lose weight. Sometimes I'm a little sad and I want to not be bothered with people. I could be a little antisocial. This is why I wanted to discuss grief. Because grief, it could come from anything. It can come from anything. Like we said, losing your job, the stock market not, performing the way you want it to. So any situation that changes a life event can have you slip in grief. And I wanted to talk about this because I feel as humans, we slip in and out of grief without realizing that that's what's happening with us. And I'm not saying everybody's, all day long, I'm grieving this, that, or the other. But there can be subtle changes that are occurring in your life that might cause you to slip in and out of the dimensions of grief. Like losing your keys. Think about that. When you're you lost your keys. So now you have to get everything recut, can't get into your house, you need a locksmith, or losing your credit cards or money. You gotta now call all the credit card companies, stop, put a stop on all your cards, because with all the identity theft, even being a victim of identity theft, being a victim of a scam, I'm sure you guys have heard how they now have these scams concerning employment. People are actually looking for work, and you have people out there preying on people who want to find a job, but they're sending them all this bogus information about employment, and they're scamming people out of thousands and thousands of dollars. I know I experienced grief, but not even really I didn't think of it in the sense of it being grief, but after going through finding the information and looking at, and doing the research, I was like, wow, I might have been in grief, but not saying yes. When I did lose my mom and other family members, yes, of course I was going to be grieving. But when I think about just a thought that came to my mind when I was doing this research, I lost a pair of sunglasses, right? And anyone that knows me, I wear sunglasses winter, spring, summer, and fall. Whenever I'm outside, I have on a pair of shades, right? And that's mainly because my eyes are sensitive to light. Like if it's too much light, or even like wintertime, the way the brightness comes off the snow, all of those things, too windy, my eyes are gonna get irritated. It's gonna appear like I'm always crying, so I always have on sunglasses. So I can recall a time when I had purchased a pair of sunglasses, because I have several. And these sunglasses, though, in particular, I took my time, I picked them out. I really liked the way they fit my face. And these sunglasses cost me a pretty penny, right? And I misplaced them. Well, actually, I'm gonna say I lost them, because I never recovered them. And so you know where this is going, right? So when I couldn't find the glasses, I did physically become ill. I do recall, now this is a number of years ago, but I do recall becoming physically ill when I couldn't find the glasses. I was getting so lightheaded. I started feeling dizzy. I was like, oh my gosh, I was feeling anxious. My heart was pounding. I was like, where are these glasses? Where are my glasses? And I know talking about this, people are like, she was getting like that over a pair of glasses. It was only a pair of glasses. But hearing how grief can affect you. Now, at that point, like I said, thinking back, and when I was in it at the moment, I didn't think I was grieving my glasses. The only thing I thought of was, oh my gosh, I can't believe I lost my glasses. Then I started getting angry, and I was upset, and I was annoyed, and we're going to talk about that, the stages. But I was going through all of that because of my glasses. And like I said, someone hearing this will be like, what is she talking about? She lost her glasses, big deal. It's not like losing a loved one. So why would she be feeling lightheaded and dizzy? But that's what I'm trying to explain to all of you today. Grief can hit us, not that we're even aware that we're grieving, but when we go through a life change, an event that changes what is going on in our life, we can be thrust into the various degrees of grief. So now, here it was, I lost the glasses. So yes, now, so when I'm doing this research, I'm thinking, wow, I was grieving my glasses? And when you say it like that, it makes it seem so like, oh my gosh, I was grieving glasses. Like I couldn't believe that I actually was grieving glasses. But I was actually grieving the loss of my glasses. And like I said, I even started walking through some of the stages as well. So let's look at some of the stages. Since I'm talking about it, let's look at some of the stages right now. And I want you to keep in mind that people move through these dimensions and stages at various degrees, and it's not linear. It could happen, you could be one place and then another place, and it's not like, okay, you're gonna first go through denial and then you're gonna go through anger. No, anger may be first. Anger may be the first thing that you go through. You might skip right over denial, but then you might pivot back to denial. So let's look at the 5 stages. The 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So now in denial, you're just, you're like, it's avoidance, confused, you're shocked, you can't believe, what it is that you're trying to process. So you keep thinking, is this true? Like when I lost the glasses and I was like, did I really lose those glasses? I'm looking all over the place. Your brain is processing what just occurred, and it's like, do I accept it? Like what is happening here? Because all you're doing is trying to understand what just occurred. Then you could go to anger, which is you get frustrated, you get irritated, you get annoyed. And once that happens, once you have come to terms with, oh yeah, it happened, so you're no longer in denial. You know it happened, so now you can move into a state of anger. You try to understand, well, how could this have happened? How could this have happened to me? How could I have placed my money in that stock? And, even when the stock market did bad, I didn't know it was going to lose that much money. Or, how could I have lost my job? Yeah, I might have been late a couple of times. Or you know what? I was the best employee they were. They kept giving me all these merits every month. Employee of the month, employee of the month. How did I end up losing my job? The anger stage. Bargaining. You become overwhelmed and helpless, right? And you might even get a little hostile. You try to make your brain understand what is coming next and what actually just happened. And then you start looking for, what can I do to relieve this, what I'm feeling, the irritation, the anxiety, what do I do next? Depression, struggling to find meaning. You reach out to others and you start telling them your story. You start recounting the situation like, I can't believe I lost my job and I was employee of the month every month. Or, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I lost so much money in the stock market. My 401k is practically wiped out. Or like in my case, I would go to people, I'm like, girl, you wouldn't believe I just lost those glasses. I just paid remember we were at the store. You start telling your story to people. Acceptance, exploring options, new plans, and you begin to move on. Your brain starts to go through the process of, you know what? Yeah, I lost yeah, I was a little sad about it, or angry because I did spend so much money, or yeah, I did lose my job, but you know what? I know I have the skills that I can go out and I could always get another job. Or yeah, I lost a lot of money in the stock market, but I'm gonna leave it on the stocks that I purchased because, I know it's gonna bounce back. I know I'm gonna make my money back. Your mind starts to come to terms with what has occurred, and you find new ways to exist without the item or the person or whatever it is that you took a loss from that pivoted you into that feeling of grief. You start to find new ways to exist without it. So I want us to think about those. Think about the dimensions, think about the stages, and just ask yourself, could I have been going through a bout of grief when ... occurred? Think about that for a moment. You are listening to What Would Kay Say here on Radio Free Brooklyn, what Brooklyn sounds like. Welcome back, welcome back. You are listening to What Would Kay Say here on Radio Free Brooklyn. It is now time for the part of the show that I call Op-Ed. And now today, we've been talking about grief, the dimensions that it holds, and the levels that it possesses individuals. We spoke about grief being more than just death of a loved one. It can also be the death or loss of something else. Grief is anything. You can experience grief due to any occurrence that changes the course of your life. But in many cases, it can be subtle. It could be ever so slight, or it can be overwhelming. It depends on the individual. It depends on the individual, what they're thinking about, what the circumstances are, and how they're capable of navigating, how they perceive information. It can change how it affects people's lives. So now, I know someone that can bring relief to any and all the dimensions, any and all of the stages that grief tries to take us through. So now remember, the dimensions were, and we're going to go through these again, I'm just to remind you, the dimensions were, emotional, physical, social, behavioral. The stages were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But I know someone who can handle all of the dimensions and the stages, regardless of what it is, regardless of what your loss is. And you see, because we all experience grief differently, God has the solution for all of us. Regardless of how you might grieve in a situation, how I might grieve a situation, regardless of the stage you might be going through, the stage I might be going through, God can handle it all. Because to God, it's all the same. And you want to know why it's all the same to him? Because he never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. We're the individuals that change. We are the ones that go through experiences differently. We are the ones that experience change on different levels. God never changes. And there is nothing that he can't fix or make better. So now, if you recall, when we first started the show today, and I began to talk about grief, I gave us two scriptures. And one of the scriptures reminded us that he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Now, the Hebrew word for brokenhearted is liv shafur, right? Liv shavur, which when you translate it from the Hebrew to English, it translates into a splintered heart. meaning deep pain of what we're experiencing after we go through a trauma or a loss. But think about it. If the scripture tells us he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, we know God is a healer, right? We know his name as a healer, Yahweh Rapha. To some, Jehovah Rapha, but Yahweh Rapha. The scripture reminds us unequivocally that God not only sees the pain that we're going through, but he can heal us from all of it. He heals the brokenhearted and he binds up their wounds. So now think about it. When you have a wound, and we're going to really break this down so you could get a true understanding, because people, and even myself included, have quoted this scripture, but quoted it. But you know how I've always talked to you about words and understanding the scripture and what is really being said. And every time you read a scripture, it can mean one thing at one point in your life and another thing at another point in your life. That same scripture, correct? So now when we really break this down, first of all, we're talking about a heart that is splintered, broken heart. Just imagine in a glass shattering on the floor. That's your heart. A million different pieces. He binds the wound. When you have a wound, right, and it's uncovered, you need to cover it, because if you don't, things can get in it and cause it to get worse, can cause infection. You know, you don't want it to get dirty when you have an open wound, right? God promises to bind up the wounds of the brokenhearted. So when he touches us in a way that he can bind, put a covering so that nothing else gets in to cause distress, to cause disturbance, to cause more pain, he's giving us his peace, his calm, to return us back to joy and happiness. Just imagine the wound that you have that's oozing, and I know this may be too graphic for people, but a wound that is oozing, you know, it's just a burn or whatever. It's just everything is happening because there's no covering over it. God then covers that wound with his peace, with his grace, with his calm, so that it can then begin to heal. That's what the scripture promises us. That's what he does to our hearts when it's splintered, when it's shattered. He binds up that brokenness. And now, the second scripture that I read for you, this was Jesus talking to the masses in the synagogues. He told them, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed." So here it is, once again, Jesus promised us healing, liberty, recovery, and freedom. All of God's promises are available to all of us all the time, but we have to trust and believe that it's so. Now, how simple is that? Jesus promised us, he said, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him, and he was anointed to preach the gospel to the poor. He was sent to heal the brokenhearted. He was sent to cover that wound so that it could then begin the process of becoming better. So he gives us the healing we need. He gives us the liberty, the recovery, and the freedom. All of those things we need when we're grieving or experiencing the various dimensions or stages of grief. Now, some may need a little more than others, but all of us need comfort when we're feeling disheartened because of a loss. So, on this last day, May 31st, of Mental Health Awareness Month, I pray, and I am praying for all of you who are struggling with mental issues or various dimensions and stages of grief that you might be going through. And as the dictionary told us, grief can come in all forms of emotional bondage due to trauma, depression, and which also is encompassed in mental illness. So my prayer is for everyone going through, at whatever level they're in, God, please grant them the strength to understand what they cannot understand, to not lean on their own understanding, but to look to you for guidance and wisdom. Because you are Yahweh Rapha. You are the Lord, our healer. So when you are going through whatever it is that you're going through at this moment, and like I said from the beginning, what led me to talk about grief today was because of all of the phone calls that I was getting concerning people that were experiencing loss, the death of loved ones. And with this being Mental Health Awareness Month, with everything going on in the world that is just chaotic and crazy, even without dealing with a death or a loss, everything, the pressure is coming on us. But the scripture reminds us there is one that we can turn to for our comfort, for our peace, for our sound mind. And he is Yahweh Rapha. And that ends op-ed. It's the end of the month, but although it's the end of the month, we are still in our month, so we still have our word of the month, which is Haneni. Here I am. And at this time, talking about grief and talking about what you might be feeling or experiencing for some sort of loss or a change in your life, arms wide open. Haneni, Lord, here I am. Go to him with everything that you have, anything that you might be questioning, any feelings that you might be experiencing. Take them to him so that he can comfort you, so that he can bind your wound. And I promise, I think I'm going to keep it all on the same, we're going to keep with the same, how can I say, the same frequency of what we've been talking about this entire program. Our promise for this week is going to come from Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. That I want you to keep with you. So whenever something is happening, whenever you might notice yourself fluctuating in and out of the various dimensions or stages of grief, remember that God can heal your broken heart. And he will definitely give you a covering for whatever is exposed or making you feel pain so that you can then start the process of healing. And with that, I say, my lovelies, I see that my time is growing short. I want you to enjoy the rest of your day or night, whenever you might happen to be listening to this, but definitely enjoy the rest of your week. Love one another, Take care of yourself. And if that means you have to step away for a moment just to relax your mind from being bombarded with all of this information that might not be good, take that time. Sometimes we need to step back from everything that's happening. Sometimes we just need to slow down and just take a deep breath just to deal and understand what is going on with ourselves. So I say with that, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of your week, and until God brings us back together again next week, peace.